Hi everyone, my name is Frezalyn of Dacillo, your presenter for today, with special participation of my co-members. Come join us as we unfold the interconnectedness of anthropology in understanding the self. So now, fasten your seatbelt as we voyage towards the anthropological perspective.
So now we are going to tackle the anthropology and culture. So what is anthropology? Anthropology is the study of what makes us human. This includes human history, the present human condition, and even the future possibilities. It also examines the biology, interactions in society, language, and especially culture.
Additionally, anthropologist is a scientist that focuses on understanding patterns of human behavior of a certain group in a given socio-cultural concept, as it study the human history from the past, present, and up to the future by means of prediction. Anthropology and its four sub-disciplines. First is the cultural, wherein anthropologists explores the diversity of our past history as well as our present. Moreover, anthropologists can also predict or make conclusions of what lies in the future by means of studying the past and the present phenomena. Culture has also two sub-disciplines, which are ethnography and ethnology. Ethnography is based on fieldwork, while ethnology is based on cross-cultural comparison. Now let's proceed to the second, which is the archaeological, which interprets the behavior of human beings through material remains. This describes that our behavior on dealing ourselves, for example, as being a good citizen and others. Third is the biological or physical. This is a scientific study that is concerned regarding the biological as well as behavioral aspects of human beings and other non-human primates. This only focuses on the behavioral aspects of the self physically. And the last sub-discipline is linguistic, or the language in its social and cultural context across time and space. In simple terms, it is the language which we use, such as Tagalog, English, and other native language that is known by the person or the self.
The traditional anthropological understanding of the self is an animal species which underwent the process of biological evolution. Anthropologists take a broad approach to understanding the many different aspects of the human experience, and it is called holism. The self is believed to have evolved from apes some 33 million years ago, and the evolutionary process of the self was traced his or her origin from hominid species or so-called Homo sapiens. Since humans has a better development in terms of brain with billion neurons and adaptation the environment for survival, the self or humans develops culture resulting in behavioral changes. Humans are living animals but superior to others due to certain factor, which means we are the highest of all animals because of this certain fact, the physical aspects and social aspects. Wherein in physical, humans are the only animal with a larger brain capacity, making him or her rational animal. Humans are also the only animal that can stand straight, allowing him or her to have better mobility in doing things. When it comes to social aspects, what makes us superior is we use language and symbol in order to communicate. Humans can invent new things for survival. So there are two very important concepts in anthropology. These are culture and culturation. So, culture is traditionally defined as systems of human behavior and thought, the traditions and capabilities of humans as they function in society. In other words, culture are those complex structure of knowledge, beliefs, arts, religion, moral, law, language, traditional practices, and all the other aspects needed to function in society. So, culture can be adaptive or maladaptive. In order to understand this, we have to know what enculturation is. Enculturation is the transmission of culture from one generation to the next. Unlike biological hereditary transmission, cultural transmission is done through observation, use of language, adaptation to environment, rituals, and formal and informal education. Every member of the community will then distinguish themselves from other communities because of the differences in the way people do things in their life.
On 1960s, Claude Lévi-Strauss's attempt to study culture as structures of human thought and derive a theory of structuralism, which states that culture are built on hidden underpinning formed from human perceptions and activity, and the idea that all these are constructs that are packed by meaning. Moreover, Clifford Geertz suggested that cultures should not be studied scientifically and in search of laws. It must be interpretively by means of its meaning. Geertz's idea provoked the existing idea that resulted for the re-examining of the ethnographic field. But too much focus on ethnographic field, it causes mislead to the true essence of culture, which is the social change. Therefore, Kotak 2008 stated that culture never disappears, as it exists from the past up to the present, and will exist through the future, as it is passed through generation to generation. Thus, culture will always exist and will remain existing, as it is part of ourself as a human being. These anthropologists undergo a series of study in the late 19th century as they studied the customs and beliefs in pre-industrial society as for them to know the human civilization in the past. Irving, 1990, said that the self is physical organism processing psychological functioning and social activities, while according to Steven, 1996, self is separate, contained, independent, unitary, consistent, and private. Separated means you are separated from your loved ones or you are far away from them. Independent is being all by yourself, which means that you live all by your own, without the dependence with other people. Unitary is being united with one another or being together. Self-contained, you are being contained in one place, which means you do not socialize with other people. You keep away from them. Consistent, you are only focused on only one thing. And lastly, private, which means that there are specific or certain things that we keep all by ourselves. Additionally, Ledoux 2002 stated that the self is not static. It is added and subtracted from the genetic maturation, learning, forgetting, stress, aging, and disease. Self also consists of two aspects, the explicit and implicit. Explicit is the aspect of the self that you are consciously aware. For example, you see something and you react by means of giving comments because you knew that thing. You are aware of its existence. Moreover, it is contradicted by implicit, that stated that the aspect of the self is not immediately available to the consciousness. The example is also the same. But this time, you know nothing about the thing, so you cannot comment anything as you are not aware of it.
Anthropological self takes place a holistic dimension of the individual person, considers both the biological and environmental aspects of the person. Some anthropologists claim that environmental exposure starts soon after birth, However, contemporary anthropologists suggest that the environmental exposure starts during conception. Anthropology defines self-awareness, permits one to assume responsibility for one's own conduct. It has been observed that a child starts to conceptualize self-awareness at age 2. However, studies also show that self-awareness is conceptualized much earlier by children sleeping with parents and are exposed to a variety of stimuli like touch and the like. Stimulation is maximized when the child is in close contact with the other members of the family. This develops the neutral circuitry or hard writing of the brain faster than with the children with least stimulation. Process of self-awareness, the child will eventually develop his or her own identity. This identity is further intensified by a practice common to all culture, the naming ritual. Naming individualizes a person. It gives a person his or her own unique traits, experiences, personality, identity, and status. The latter, however, gives the person's name in its place as a member of a group. The person's name is also a symbol of one's status in the community. It either gives you honor or stigma. The person's name is at the same time a project in process. The self that bears the name continues to establish an identity of the name in the community.
Self and behavioral environment. In order to strengthen the identity of the self, one must able to grasp different behavioral orientations. These are concepts that will help situate the self in different behavioral conditions. The object orientation. Position the self in relation to the surrounding object. The self should be able to act responsibly to the cultural objects around us. Next is the spatial orientation. Provides the self with the personal space in relation to other people or things. It is important to note that the self must be able to keep personal space. Next is the temporal orientation. Endows the self with a sense of time. Time is truly relevant to the cultural communities. Lastly, the normative orientation. It provides the self with a grasp of accepted norms in the community. At the same time, normative orientation providing the self an idea of behaviors which are not acceptable to community. Like, the self must know that killing, stealing, hurting are the behavior that should be avoided. In order for us to know the identity of self and know who we are in the society, we must able to know what are those different behavioral orientation around us. We must act responsibly and accept norms, the society that we are living. The self embedded in culture.
When the self is able to distinguish what is acceptable behavior and what is not, only follows that the self is already able to recognize the differences of oneself and the other. This ability to manage the difference between selves is what makes the self embedded in the culture. The claim of the self is embedded in the culture can only be embraced when the self recognizes its relation to everything else. The complexity of cultural identities of people, things, and events shall be recognized and respected by the self. The individual self must remain reflexive of the similarities and unique differences of everything around it. Culture is also not a force or casual agent in the world, but a context in which people live out their lives. This is according to Clifford's 1973. Culture refers to the shared values, beliefs, and norms of a specific group of people. Therefore, culture influences the manner we learn, live, and behave. Because of this, many tourists believe that the culture is an important shaper of our personalities. And once we distinguish what is acceptable behavior and what is not, also we know how to determine differences between other person around it, make the self embedded in the culture. Now that we know what is anthropologist and the essence in knowing who we are or who I am in this perspective of anthropological discipline. So, what does it mean to be human? An inquiry that the anthropologist seeks to answer as they studies human as both biological and social creatures. Thanks to those anthropologists, we can now know the essence of being human.